I am, as you know, I love documentaries of all kinds, and especially if they're music related. And I really enjoyed a documentary that has just been released called The Original Charvel Gang, and it's available now. And its director is Paul Gervasi, and he joins us now live on the phone. Hey, Paul, welcome. Nice to talk to you.
EDDIE TRUNK, hello from Los Angeles.
Paul, let me ask, how you doing? Let me ask you this. So have we met? I don't know your history, and I apologize if we met or I know you in the past, but can you fill us in on your background? Because I know you're the director of this documentary, but you also appear in it playing. So what is your background in making this film?
Well, first of all, we met at a taping of Disturbed at That Metal Show.
Okay.
I think I was with John Moyer and David Draymond, and then we went to the Rainbow with Jim, Don, and I think your producer, Jeff Baumgartner?
Yep.
We went to the Rainbow, got hammered, and had a blast.
That sounds about right.
And I think I was bugging you about my first film, Cherri Future. And then we met again. Was there an Angel reunion in Las Vegas? Because I think I met you with Frank Domino, some kind of reunion out there.
Yeah, it was an award show, and they were given an award at Vegas Rocks or whatever that magazine was that was in existence at the time, and I presented them with the award. They all came together for that. That was a number of years ago, but I do remember that. Okay,
I was there to interview Punky for the segment of Charvel in the movies, so that's where I probably ran into you there. But yeah, we've hung a couple times. I was going to send you a photo of us, but
all right, fair enough. So let me ask you this, Paul. When did you work for Charvel? That's watching the doc. You're in it and you're playing and you're interviewed along with all these other people, but I'm trying to get your connection to Charvel unless I missed it in the doc. Had you worked there?
Yeah, good question. I got laid off from Lockheed Aircraft. I had a really good job, and I thought, well, I'm laid off. I want to get work somewhere really fun and cool because I was really wanting to move to LA and play in a band and stuff and play music. So Mike Eldred hired me at Charvel in San Dimas, California, I think around in 81. So I was there from 81 to 83. So imagine being this kid working there, and freaking Robin Crosby walks in, and Holdsworth and Eddie Van Halen, and they meet some of these guys I became friends with, especially Alan Holdsworth. So yeah, I worked from 81 to 83, and that was sort of the peak time for Charvel, and that was my first exposure to sort of meeting, I always call them successful people, not rock stars, but that's where I was exposed to meeting people.
So let me ask you this, because I am not a musician. I don't play an instrument. That's why I do what I do, but I have a great appreciation, obviously, for it, and tons of people that I know and friends do, and many of them are in your film. But I am not, so I can't come at it from a technical standpoint, a playing standpoint. But what made Charvel guitars so unique and so interesting? Because even somebody who was not a musician, around that time when I was starting out in the industry myself and getting out of high school, the name became very synonymous with some of my favorite players. Tell the audience, and of course the film documents this, but what was it that was so unique about what Wayne Charvel was doing and how that guitar company started?
As you know, in the film, it sort of gradually happened. So it started with Wayne Charvel was a musician, and to pay his bills, he was making bodies, and he joined up with Lynn Ellsworth, who made necks. And they started, and then he was working for Overflow for Fender guitars, and because Fender couldn't keep up with the repairs, so Wayne did that. So this was over the years a gradual thing of Wayne getting into custom work. The thing about Wayne, I don't know if you ever met Wayne Charvel. He's a really nice guy, and he's really warm. And I think he started listening to the local musicians in California. And remember, after World War II, we were making all these hot rods. Well, we weren't, Californians were inventing hot rods and paint jobs because they wanted excitement after the war and choppers and stuff. So California is sort of known for making custom guitars and custom race cars. So if you're a race car driver or a musician, you want something that looks cool and feels good in your hand, and it does impact the music and changes the whole landscape of music, because we had instruments that could play. So the attraction was getting a guitar that looked cool and played cool. But again, Fender wasn't listening to the street. Wayne Charvel was, because we could walk up there and say, hey, or Michael Anthony would walk in there and tell him what he wanted, custom stuff, because we play the clubs and we know what the problems are. We wanted higher output pickups. So to answer your question, that was the attraction, to get a custom guitar that outperformed, because everyone's competitive. Everybody wants to be the best they can be. To answer your question.
So you yourself, Paul, are seen in the film playing, and it's a really cool jam session. It's you and Vinny Appice, Rudy Sarzo playing in an airplane hangar. And I thought that was badass, by the way. I thought you guys sounded great. I don't know if you ever thought of doing a band together with those two, but that was a killer thing. So what is your background as a musician as well? Had you been in bands and stuff?
Well, look, first of all, let me see. Valerie Ince is one of the producers on the film, and I'm friends with, I knew Vinny from Kill Devil Hill, and I knew Rudy from, I think, Ultimate Jam Nights. He would, I kind of met him through there, and he's a really nice guy. And all these guys in the film, so
yeah.
So that's how that came about. So she put that together. I said, well, I'm going to try not to go too far backwards. The film was about Grover Jackson at first, the Grover Jackson story. That didn't work out. I was totally fucked because I had maybe a year's of interviews and stuff shot that was in the can, and I'm like, holy fuck, what am I going to do? I don't have Grover. And I called up Wayne Charvel. So the whole film had changed at that point. So that's why I said, well, fuck, I'll just put myself in it. I'm not a problem. I'll host the film, try and narrate it based on my interviews with Grover Jackson. Got a hold of Wayne Charvel, and this is right before their place burnt down in Paradise, California. So how lucky, was I to be able to do that? And then I saved all their photos because I filmed all their photos. So that's how that kind of came about. But my background was, my mom's a classical pianist. My dad was a cinema photographer. That's what he did for a business. I played the clubs in the 90s in LA. I got signed to A&M like a solo deal around 96. And that's when the music business was sort of falling apart. The bottom was falling out with all the Napster and the downloading and no money and the infighting and all the label people and stuff not making money. So I was frustrated, and I got into film, working with Lady Gaga and stuff, and I started my own little music video company. So I was doing both. I was a session guy from the 90s in LA, working with, Ernie Isley and like all kinds, just doing demos. And that led to my deal with A&M, and trying to play live as much as I could, it's really difficult to be in a band. It's one of the toughest jobs in the world because of the competition and trying to get in stuff. So
Sure.
I don't want to go too long about myself here, but
yeah, I was just curious. The reason I asked that is because, again, I'm just trying to figure out where you come into this story. So, musician in the area, you've gotten into doing films now. You've made this movie, but you had some history with Charvel guitars. Now, before you mentioned Grover Jackson, and that ties in heavily into this story, which we'll get to in a second, because obviously Charvel guitars, Jackson guitars, anybody knows those guitar companies, and I did not know this, but they're very much connected in a way. But let me ask you about Eddie Van Halen, because he looms large in this story, and obviously this film was made prior to his death, because at the end of the film, it comes up that he declined to participate in the film. But let me ask you, what the whole thing with Charvel and Eddie Van Halen was the fact that on the back of the first Van Halen record, he's holding a Charvel guitar. Did that, obviously, when Eddie Van Halen stormed the scene, became a huge moment for Charvel and that company, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, it went crazy after that because he had credited. Again, Wayne Charvel is a really cool guy. Like if you, I don't know if you've met him, but when you do meet him, you're like, oh fuck, this guy's like my dad from another. You know, he's just a really warm, nice guy. And like I say, it's funny because all he was doing was bodies, and Lynn Els was doing the necks. Michael Anthony went in there first, and Wayne did some stuff for Michael Anthony. Then Ed comes in, bought some seconds, which are bodies with blemishes, or there's something a little wrong, little nicks or something. And then liked Wayne so much, they gave them a credit. But it was probably Michael Anthony and Eddie who said, let's give Charvel a credit. Well, now, if you remember, the first Van Halen album came out in midst of the disco and punk scene, and they just busted through that. So that opened the door for, I think, Rat and all the bands and those 80 bands really broke wide open for them. So where were we going with this?
Well, just asking you about Eddie. So Eddie having that Charvel guitar and crediting Charvel on the back of the first record put Charvel guitars on the map. Now, you talk about Michael Anthony, and for people that don't know, the legendary Jack Daniels bass was made by that company. Michael's in the documentary. Michael's one of my favorite people in the world, and he's in there telling the story about the Jack Daniels bass. There's stories about the splatter bass, all these iconic guitars that you've seen. Warren DeMartini is in the film, as you mentioned, Punky Meadows. There's just so many people. Steve Vai is in it. So my audience is going to love watching this because they just love hearing from all these people, and it's great to see them in there. But I want to ask you this, because this is what I'm not clear on, and you kind of alluded to it a second ago. So Wayne Charvel starts Charvel Guitars, but very shortly, it seemed like not many years after he started it, and it had this great success and this great momentum, that in comes Grover Jackson, who he makes a deal with to basically take over the company, Charvel Guitars. Tell my audience about that. It's covered in the documentary. Everybody can rent the documentary, the original Charvel Gang, to get more on this. But if you can, Paul, tell everybody about what happened there.
Okay, so I dug as deep as I could, and I did work there, and I met with Wayne, and I actually recorded some interviews with Grover Jackson to get his, I want to get the story right. And there were so many rumors going around what had happened. Like, why the fuck did Wayne Charvel sell a multi-million-dollar business to Grover Jackson? Well, I think at that point, if you go back, what Wayne started in the early 70s, so I think he was already burnt out at a certain point, and they were in financial trouble. I don't think Eddie came there and quick enough to turn the business around, and it was probably easier for, I guess, Wayne to bail out and sell it to Grover Jackson. And Grover Jackson in the film, according to the interview, went there to get a guitar made, and he ended up getting a job there. So he was working in the office, and maybe Grover saw what was going on financially and thought, in Grover's defense, man, he's a great business guy. He's a hard worker, and he I guess sometimes when you're on the outside, you can see the problems, and you're fresh, and you got that energy, and you're young, and Grover said, fuck, I can turn this around. I think that's what happened, but there is some gray areas, so I was trying to be as careful as I could with the story to tell it like what had happened. And then when he left, Wayne was still making guitars after he sort of got out of that financial burden. And they're still making guitars now. They're making Wayne guitars. But that's the best I can explain. I guess watch the movie. And there was 46 interviews. And as you know, when you talk to people, the story changes a little bit, which I kind of let happen to a point. So that's all I really know.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So the other part of this that looms large in terms of legendary and sadly deceased guitar players is Randy Rhoads. And that I found that part of the film really interesting because, again, I did not know this. I did not know that Grover Jackson takes over Charvel and Randy Rhoads starts coming around much like Eddie Van Halen did earlier. And correct me if I'm wrong on the story, they develop what basically was the Randy Rhoads V-looking guitar, and they thought that it would be it was Randy Rhoads' idea to then say to Grover Jackson, instead of calling this a Charvel, just call it Jackson, and that's where Jackson Guitars was born, out of Charvel. Do I have that right?
Correct. Vic Verchey was the first guy to do that sort of neck to the body V, and so it was sort of already in play, those type of guitars. And I think Charvel was getting heat for the Fender headstock copyright. Grover had to design a new headstock for Randy's guitar, and Randy and him worked on that shark fin style body, and the first one was really too big. And I've had lots of conversation with Tim Wilson, which was the actual first wood in the wood department that cut that first body. Then Mike Shannon got involved, and they were both involved, and they made adjustments. So that's sort of how that came about. And Grover Jackson's was very nervous about putting Jackson on it, but Randy was saying, let's put Jackson on it. And it's funny because those first Jackson guitars didn't have decals, so they hired a guy to, those pinstriping guys to write Jackson. I remember this, writing Jackson on the headstock. So that was like, well, fuck, we can't hire this guy every time. Let's get some decals. And I thought it was going to be successful. I mean, those guitars were sort of like Les Pauls, neck through the body, 2 pickups. So that, if that answers your question, that's how. Yeah,
but there's something in the doc where they talk about where they thought that if they branded that guitar as a Charvel, that it could hurt Charvel's business because I guess so many people would gravitate towards it. So it was Randy Rhoads' idea to just basically say, well, then market it like it's a different company. It's basically coming out of the same shop, but then there's 2 different brands, and that's how Charvel and Jackson Jackson Guitars was born, out of Grover's last name. And it was Randy that said that because they were concerned about that taking too much attention away from Charvel, right?
Correct. Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah, I found the whole thing. Now, the last thing I want to ask you about, Paul, and again, people can learn a lot more about all of this in the documentary, and I really recommend it. Again, it's called The Original Charvel Gang, directed by Paul, who's also in it, and that's who we're talking with right now. So Grover Jackson, did you approach him to be in this? Because it's telling that he's not in this, and he's so much a part of this story. I don't know him at all. What's his deal?
I love Grover. He's the master builder of guitars, but he's a little eccentric, and it just didn't work out. I can't talk about it too much. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So it just didn't work out, and I don't know what to say. I guess I can't talk about it too much, but it just didn't work out, and I told him I'm going to take the film in a different direction, and obviously people are going to watch the film, and some are getting mad, like, why isn't Grover in this? Well, I can't make people be in the film if they don't want to be in it. So it sounds like your original plan, though, was for this film to be actually about him. Is that correct? Correct.
And then he opted out, and then you had to kind of repivot and figure out another way to do it with the content that you had.
Yeah, things were just building up, and there was this incident with David Gilmour of Pink Floyd, and it went in the shitter, and I just said thank you very much, but this is not going where because this is a 5-year journey for me. It was 46 interviews. You don't have time for things to go wrong. Things need to keep moving because the film process is such a long thing. Just doing the 46 interviews was, I think we spent 3 years, like, okay, we're waiting for Punky, we're waiting for Steve Stevens. You know, we're always waiting on somebody. So I guess this I thought I could bang out in a year, naively, and this is my second film. So if that explains, you know, why I just didn't want to mess around. I just want to get this film done and move on. But now it's sort of blowing up, and now everybody wants a Charvel guitar, and it's really bringing attention to kids that want to be guitar players, real guitar players. I had actually walked into, during one of my low moments of doing this film, I walked into a Guitar Center, and there were these kids standing around looking at a Jackson and a Charvel guitar, and they were going, "Who's Jackson? Is this Jackson 5?" I'm like, fuck, that's a message from God, and it's an omen. I got to make this movie. So my Italian background is, you start something, you finish it.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I really enjoyed the film, and I would tell my audience to definitely check it out. It's called The Original Charvel Gang. Paul, people listening that want to watch this and maybe order it or stream it tonight, where do we send them? Where should they go?
If you have that app on your TV, Apple TV is a good way to get it. You have to rent it. You can rent it on YouTube. I just saw it there. And for some reason, the upper brass at Amazon has changed, so you can only watch it there in South America. So we're still working on distribution for Europe, because I'm getting a lot of messages from all over the world. And, you know, I'll remind you, people attempted to do this film before and couldn't do it, because it's a lot of headaches and a lot of getting people together and tracking people down. Luckily, I'd worked there, and I still know the kids I grew up with, that they work in the custom shop for Fender and Jackson Charvel guitars. So I was in contact with them, and so they helped me get a hold of a lot of people. Lisa Paulus helped me get a hold of a lot of people for this. Valerie Ince was a big help. Peter Kalish got us some people. I don't know, I probably went off track.
No, but I get what you're saying. I mean, it's a lot to do these films. It takes a lot out of you, and it's exhausting trying to deal with everybody. And I've been on the fringes of doing some of that work myself here and there, and it's a lot to deal with. Well, I'll tell you what, I enjoyed it, and I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you got it out. There's a ton of artists in this, as Paul mentioned. Tons of interviews that he did, tons of people that my audience would know and want to hear from. And it's absolutely, again, even if you're not a musician like me, it's something you'll really enjoy hearing from and seeing these people, the stories of the Jack Daniels bass, the splatter guitar, the Gene Simmons axe guitar. I mean, all these iconic guitars that people have seen, how they came together and the stories behind them are covered in this documentary. As Paul just said, Apple, you can get it on Apple, you can get it on YouTube. And it is called The Original Charvel Gang. Paul, I got to run. It's great to visit with you for a few minutes. Hopefully when I'm in LA, we'll get to have a couple drinks at the Rainbow again. And good luck with the film the rest of the way.
Hey, man, thanks for all your compliments, and honored to be with you on the show. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Paul. Talk to you soon. Take care. There he goes. Paul Gervasi, everybody. Appreciate him joining us again. The documentary is called The Original Charvel Gang. You just heard it's out now on those platforms, with assuming more to come.